Okay, we are now recording. If Bogdan ever doesn't come to Ignite, I'm going to be screwed. You are now permanently invited every single time, Bogdan. Actually, it's not just an invitation. You're now required to be here every single time. Thank you for remembering what I don't. So what were your ahas about the SPA, or questions or concerns or anything else that you might have about the SPA? Its effectiveness, how we use it, what that through line looks like. Yes, Barbara.
I have a question with regard to FSBOs. I was thinking, like, it would be great to be able to approach a FSBO that has been on the market for a long time and is not doing anything with the SPA.
Yeah, agreed. And I think
sure how I would approach it with them, like how I would, if they are really fixed on that. And anyway, I was just trying to think, like, how could I, even before meeting them, maybe send out a postcard or something like that, give them some comparisons, tell them, if it was priced more strategically, something like that. Maybe it's a crazy idea, but.
Yeah, no, it's not a crazy idea. I think the way I would address it is, do you remember the for sale by owner script that we went through maybe 2 weeks ago or so? You may not have been on that one particular call, but I think that FSBO script, and so you can go back and watch it in one of the recordings, but it's like it was never either session 3 or session 4 that we went through that. I think when you're having those Monday conversations with your for sale by owner, the idea obviously is to get an appointment. Working through them with the SPA is the appointment, right? But I think the FSBO scripts that I gave you in terms of working forward to get the appointment may work more effectively than diving into, let me start talking price with you.
Right.
What else? What other ahas did you have from the SPA? Oh, it's going to be one of those calls today, huh? Okay. Does everyone need some, like, should we stop and do some calisthenics? Do you need to go and grab a cup of coffee? Donna has her adult beverage. She might need to drink it faster. So what else? We spent like an hour on it. Go ahead.
The biggest thing I learned was that it's all about positioning and strategy, not so much about comparison, which I think most agents tend to focus on.
Yeah, right. So it's go ahead, keep going.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, and then building on that, your only goal in that entire portion of your presentation is to empower the seller to be able to make their own choice. And then I also liked when you said so you provide the data to empower them to make a decision, and then your responsibility at that point, once they come up with a number, is to repeat it back and then validate their decision, unless it's so far off base that you never repeat the number back to them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's a really good synopsis of what we spent about an hour plus going over on Friday. Would you guys agree? I mean, Seth just kind of nailed it. That is those are the ahas from the SPA. And I'm glad that you walked away from that conversation and that session with the idea that asking questions, being a consultant, and empowering the seller, that's what you're there for, right? And that sets you apart from people who show up looking to list the house. Right? When you show up looking to list the house, it's all about you and about you sharing your information instead of being the educator, instead of showing up and really helping someone be empowered to make a great decision about this property that they look to dispose of. So I love that. Anybody else?
I have a little bit of a. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay. Hey, thank you, John. I particularly like talking to the seller about seeing their property through the buyer's eyes. I have yet to use that, but I have a listing coming up this week. And the idea that you have a genuine conversation about what a buyer would see, it opens the door to a lot of questions that you can ask the seller. Well, what do you like about your property? And now, what would a buyer see? And then, of course, that leads to the next one. The bank, is the bank appraiser going to look at?
Yeah.
When they see your house. So that was a good way to approach my listing coming up.
Excellent. Excellent. You know, and it's what you're talking about really is expectation setting, right? Because that whole piece of that script is about the expectation that you're setting for the seller about how they'll need to look at their own property. And I think that one of the reasons that's such a powerful statement to or expectation to set as you're moving forward with this conversation is because we oftentimes arrive and have this thought in our head that the seller shouldn't be a seller, right? So here's what I can tell you from experience. Most sellers behave very similarly. That doesn't mean they say the same things or they act identically to each other, but for the most part, sellers behave like sellers. And so you shouldn't ever be surprised that sellers look at their homes through the eyes of the seller, right? You shouldn't be surprised that the seller says, oh, well, but my kitchen is so much better than all those others, even when they're not. Those are just sellers being sellers. I would offer to you that I have been in the position of being a real estate agent and being a seller. And I fell into the same trap myself. We're not immune to that for the most part, right? You have to be really, really skilled to be able to pull way back. I wasn't that skilled. I had to have Debbie come in and take over the last time I sold a property because I was thinking like a seller. And so to help them understand how to think, right? Gary says the definition of leadership is to teach people how to think so they can get what they want when they want it. Right? As leaders in our own businesses, as leaders to our clients, that same concept applies, right? Teach people how to think by helping them understand the process. Set that expectation right up front. And now you're helping guide them through a process that'll be far less frustrating for them and for you because now everyone knows the rules. If you don't set the rules out in the beginnings of these conversations, you can't expect the seller to follow rules that they don't even know, which is why I'm so glad Stephen brought that up because it is a very powerful expectation to set right up front. Donna, did you have something on that or something additional?
Something additional. Well, kind of same topic.
Yeah.
So what I love about the SBA script is the fact that it is just a singular, succinct, yet all-encompassing process that is so easily repeatable that you can go in time after time after time. You know exactly where you're going to start, where the middle is, where the end is. You start to figure out exactly where they're going to push back and where they're not going to push back. And it just frees your mind that then you can truly help the client because you're not worried about what you're going to say, how you're going to get there, when do I pull this out? It's so repeatable. That's what I love about this process.
Yeah. It's kind of duplication at its finest, right? Because it is simple and I think you said the word succinct, and I agree with those words. Right. John, what else?
Mine's more of a worry, Rick. So I understand the whole process. My one worry though is after you go through those 3 comparatives and you have them do everything through the buyer's eyes, then when you go to that list of their competition, my fear there would be that they would start picking out all the things that you didn't have in there as a comparative and saying, why isn't my house like that? So that's sort of my one little concern. I know you probably have something to be able to combat that, but.
Well, so I think instead I'm going to let the folks on the call who use this system give you their experiences as to whether or not, sellers go in that direction. So I know there's a bunch of you who kind of utilize this system. What have your experiences been once you get to that point?
Repeat the
Wait a minute.
question in one
Yeah,
sentence.
exactly. What did he say? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just repeat the question one time.
Sorry. So you have the three comparables, and you say these are the comparables to your house, right? And then when you finally get to here, let me actually read it line by line here. And it says, here's a list of all the current competition in this range. So it's a much bigger list at that point. My one fear is obviously that's a larger range than what your comparables are. You have three comparables that are sort of in a tighter range, and your competition might be in a little bit bigger range. My fear would be your potential client is going to say, well, why shouldn't, why isn't my house more like this one on the top of the list here?
Go ahead, Donna.
So I understand what you're saying. And I think there's two pieces here. First of all, when they push back, my house isn't, well, how come the house across the street isn't in this? Remember, what we're showing them is, and this is important, the three best comparable properties for your house. You have to say that with conviction. You have to believe that. Yeah, and I looked at that one, and these are the three best comparables for your home. You keep coming back to that. Remember, you're driving the bus. But when you hold up that list of actives, that's more to show them how crowded the field is. It's not to say I'm comparing your house to these. Now I've compared your house to the three best. We've decided that, we've agreed, we've walked through that. Now I want you to see where the entire competition field is. These houses may or may not be comparable to your house, but these are the other ones that are on the market. It's to make them see how broad the playing field is. It isn't just about you. So we're using them for two different things. Don't normally get that sort of pushback in that way.
Yeah, that's well said, Donna. And what I would add is just to be certain that we're all clear, that list of current competition in the range isn't a list of comparable properties. It's a list of all the properties that are on the market. So if you've got in that particular price range, so you could get simpler to answer the question. Excuse me, you can't get simpler than what Donna just said. If someone says, well, why, what about this one? This one's up here at 595. Yeah, the best three sold comps were the ones that we talked about. This is all the active competition, so that when you go on the market, people will likely be looking at your house and these others on this page.
I use another concept that I throw in here with the comps, and that is our objective here is to give you a competitive advantage and not put you at a competitive disadvantage. So I want you to look really carefully at the comps that we're discussing and tell me, where do you think you will come out ahead?
I like that too, right? Competitive advantage versus competitive disadvantage, right? And remember, and Donna touched on it a little bit, those two steps are two different steps in the process. The comps are the comps are the comps. That's honing people in on where their home will probably sell in some sort of small range, tight range where their home will probably sell, right? That's a number. The list of actives is all about positioning. It's all about competitive advantage versus disadvantage. So you're really having two separate conversations. This is about probable value with the comps. This is about positioning against competition. Does that help, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, like for me mentally, what I have to do is make sure that when you go through those three comparatives, that they really understand that these are the best ones, and really lock them in there.
Yeah.
Before you move on. And I think what Debbie said in terms of that list, where to be competitive is really key too.
Here's the other thing I will add. Not only do you have to push or press that these are the best 3 sold comps, you need to make sure that you actually have the best 3 sold comps, right? If you've done a lazier job of pulling some comps, and then there's other comps that might show up on that list that really are better, well, right, there's no objection handler for that because you put yourself in that position, right? You have to dig your way out of that sucker. So make sure that when you say they're the best 3 sold comps, you've done the work to make sure they really are the best 3 sold comps, and then you won't have issues. Remember, they're 2 separate steps. Don't fuse them together. One's about perceived value or probable value. One's about positioning against competition. Anything else? That was a good question, John. Thank you for that. Ahas or concerns? Worries? Excitements? No? Okay. We got to move quicker or Herm's going to fall asleep. So we got to remember, I can see you. It's the power of Zoom.
Wait.
Rick,
All right. Yeah. Yes,
I
Nicole.
was just going to say, I had my first, I represented a buyer and I had my first, we put in an offer over the weekend. It was really exciting. And then it all fell apart this morning. They went with somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, that I can tell you that at least in the last 3 months or so, we call that Monday. Unfortunately, right?
We went over asking, but I think it went way over asking.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes sometimes they win and sometimes they don't. The good news and the best advice I can give you in that scenario is help the buyers understand that the best remedy for that is to get right back on the horse and go and find something else to be excited about. Don't allow them to wallow and be upset and, why us? Oh, how horrible. Nope. It's just the way the business is running right now. It's the market that we've chosen to enter. So, you did everything you could. We're going to take what we learned from this one and apply it to the next one and come out on top.
And could I say something to that, Rick? That these days it seems like just wait and the agent will call you back and try to re-engage when their buyer falls through.
Yeah, that's the other
That's
side of
happening
that,
a lot. Yeah.
right? Well, yeah, well said, Lisa. Well said. It's not over till it's over, right? So, good deal, and awesome job, right? So just know that the market is very competitive and a little tricky right now, and so any strategy you can use, and we're going to talk about additional buyer strategies as we move forward towards the end of the week and move into our buyer unit. Anything else about the SPA before we charge forward? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to spend 10 minutes. Let's see what we got here. How many of you are there? 28 of you. All right. So I'm going to push you into some small breakout rooms with 2 or 3 of you in a room. And what I want you to do, as a matter of fact, I'm going to make sure there's 3 just in case somebody's either not really on or invisible or doesn't have the scripts or whatnot. And so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to utilize the SPA that I gave you, those scripts, and just work with each other. I asked you to practice over the weekend. And for those of you who did, this will be a cinch. For those of you who didn't, I want you to get the words out, right? And so I want you to spend 10 minutes, which means you'll have about 5 minutes each. Don't make this, the person playing the seller, don't make this into a whole big study in being a seller. It's not about you as the seller. It's about the agent utilizing the words from this script to just kind of figure out the flow and know how to ask the questions. So allow the agent to kind of run through this and just be the sounding board to allow the agent to get to the next part of the script. Run through it once, then switch, run through it again, and then I'll pull you back. So you have about 10 or 12 minutes on that. Don't hide, because if you hide, then the person that you're in the room with doesn't get to doesn't get to have the benefit of what's going on. So let's make sure that we're engaged. I'll see you in like 10 or 12 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Excuse me, Rick.
Yes, hi.
Hi, sorry. The breakout room that I was put in, I'm not sure who the woman was, but she's like no longer there. Is there any way I could jump in with another group?
Yeah, so I saw that. I moved you to room 9. It looks like you just have to, let me see if I'll move you one more. I'm going to move you twice. So because the room you're in, so did you get a message?
Let me see. No. Oh, no, I didn't. It's weird.
Let me see what else I can do. I don't know why you're not getting a message.
It doesn't like me.
You were in the room when the rooms got created, right?
Yes.
I don't know how to force a, typically when I move.
You don't know how to force me into another team.
Yeah, because well, this now says that you're in a room with 2 other people. Like I said, I saw that your room only had you in it, so I moved you, but I don't know why you're not seeing a little button to click on to go out of this room. And
I can tell you, I don't have like a little, normally there's that little screen that pops up and it says like join breakout. When I click, but I do see when I click the little, the ellipses down at the bottom, it says more, and it says in this menu, join breakout room. So maybe I'll try that.
Yeah, do that. That should do it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay, everybody should be back shortly. Like 10 seconds. Here they come. Welcome back. Was that fun? Awesome. Talk to me a little bit about that experience. What did you hear? What did you learn? Any ahas from doing it once or twice?
So, going through the script with me and John here, my question is it okay to, I don't know if you agree with me with this, but if you change or take out a couple things in the script?
Change the script?
Well, I follow the script, but then when you get down,
He doesn't like the word
to,
precise.
yeah, when you get down to like that paragraph over there with the precise, I kind of go straight to the point. I'm a high D. If that makes sense to anybody.
Okay, so just not for nothing, Christian. There's no one who's a higher D than me on this call, and I don't change the words. And let me tell you why. Right? Let me tell you why. You don't like the word precise. The word precise is the whole point of all the things that you've done beforehand. Right? The macro conversations, the questions you asked was to help people be precise. The macro conversations of supply and demand graph and month supply of inventory was to help people understand that they have to be precise.
I
So
see.
to get all the way into the SPA and then not drive them to precision, you've set them up for precise, right? That's why that word is there, because it appears in the scripts that you worked on them with from the macro conversations. And without driving them to precise, then they're all over the place, right?
I see.
So what I encourage you to do is use it as written, because when you use it as written over and over and over and over again, you won't dislike the word precise anymore. Because instead what you'll realize is that by using the word precise, you're actually going to get precise answers from the sellers. And it makes the whole job of the listing consultation 1,000 times simpler, right? And after you say it a whole bunch of times, guess what? Any hangups you had about a certain word, you kind of move through and pass them, because now you've said it so many times, it just sounds like you, right?
Okay. So I need to memorize my lines more. I think I got the first 3 paragraphs down. I need to memorize the last paragraph.
Yeah, love that. And remember, you can always make a little bit of a cheat sheet as a document on your clipboard to fill out until it's in your head.
Gotcha. All right.
What else?
Hey, Rick.
What?
Yeah, Sydney.
Hey, so we threw around a couple of different scenarios. The 2 most likely responses from a seller regarding the strategic positioning, and
Yes.
one was if you really explain yourself well to the seller, and you present them with the 3 comps, and you ask them, hey, where do you think we should end up in the spectrum of houses? And one scenario would be where your seller says, well, I don't want to be the most expensive guy on the block, because strategically that's not the best move. I want to be coming maybe a little lower than the highest comp, just to draw more eyes and bring more people in, because I understand in this market we're getting a lot of scenarios with multiple bids. The other scenario was the buyer just says, no, my house is worth more than all 3 of these comps, and this is the number I think it can get. I want to be super aggressive. I think it can get this number. And then, it was fun to talk through kind of how to overcome that one, using what you mentioned about saying, well, is it a good move to price our house at that number if there's no real data to back that up? And just explaining to the customer that if you're not supporting your number with data, then you're really compromising your ability to sell the house quickly and to do a good job marketing the property.
Yeah, and so I love that that thoughtfulness behind all of those scenarios, right? And what I would encourage you to do is remember that, again, we've given you some words for that conversation. And as I will tell you, because I've been there, as real estate agents, we tend to err on the side of, let me talk more to make this better. And I would encourage you to learn right from the very start, whether you're launching or relaunching your career, less is more, right? And so if someone says, I don't really care about any of this stuff, my house is far better and it lives way up here, there's an objection handler for that. I understand. I'm curious what specific evidence exists based on the data that we've just reviewed that supports that number. And you leave it at that, right? So when you use the objection handlers and stop, the silence allows them to have to pick up the conversation and search for an answer. And I'll tell you that sometimes that answer is, they resist that answer, right? They're not interested in admitting that there's no specific evidence. So sometimes you have to ask the question a second time or a third time. My record is 5 times with the same seller in a row, because when I asked the question, they would deflect it. One of the things that sellers they're not necessarily officially trained. However, it seems like they've all gone to the same school of deflection, right? Because you'll ask a very pointed question like, what specific evidence exists that supports the data that we've just reviewed to support that number? And they will say, well, houses where I'm going are far more expensive.
Meaning,
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out how that answers the question. And so instead of making them wrong, you get to have an additional conversation that really is the same words. Yeah, I completely understand. However, I am curious, based on the data that we just reviewed, what specific evidence exists to support that number? So it's sort of aside from the fact that you might need more, right? What specific evidence exists? And I'll tell you, by time number 5, this woman was roaring mad. And so I changed the script a little bit, and because I was about to literally say the same thing for the 5th time. And I said to her, Mrs. Just, her name was Mrs. Just, you look really angry. And I have a feeling that I'm the root of a lot of that anger, for which I apologize. That was certainly not my intent. However, at the risk of you punching me in the nose, it's important enough that I'm going to ask this question just one more time, because I think we really need, together as partners, need to come up with an answer to it. And that question is, understanding all the things that you just told me about what you want and what you need, based on the data that we have reviewed and the data that the buyers will use and the data that the buyer's appraiser will use, how do we justify that number? Because do you see, with no justification, it's just a wish. And I sat and got quiet. And by the 5th time, instead of punching me in the nose, she actually started to cry. And she looked at her husband, who was frustrated. I think she was looking for more than frustration from her husband. She didn't get that in the scenario that I'm relaying to you. But she started to cry, and she said, I don't understand why we have to give this house away. And I said, I understand that it can feel that way. Does it make sense to you to look at this objectively? Even if you don't agree with it, look at this objectively, and let's develop an answer, an objective answer. And if you then disagree so vehemently with that objective answer and are willing to concede the things you said earlier in this conversation were important to you, because by the way, her husband had already moved somewhere else. He started his job and he was commuting, coming home on the weekends. If you're willing to concede having Marty be here all week or be with you and the kids all week, then subjectively you can make a decision not to, we were actually looking to move the price. This was a price reduction conversation that I'm relaying to you. However, I want you to get to a place of objectively understanding what the market sees. And then you can disagree with that. Right? Do you see how sometimes separating that out can help them take the steps they need to actually move forward? Sometimes they see it all as one decision. Let's help them break it out. Let's look and see. I won't hold you to it. You still get to make the ultimate decision. And then I have to make a decision about whether or not the market will support that. And so that in partnership, we can build a strategy that actually achieves your results. Because if not, I may choose to turn you down now rather than let you down later. I don't want this to end in us resenting each other. I'd rather step back and give someone else an opportunity than have this go south on us. See how that works? So sometimes it's just a matter of using the script and then using the script multiple times to help people get past their stuck point. Hey, P.S., by the way, sometimes in all of this, you get to a point where you get emotion. Just be prepared for that. Nobody ever told me that when I was new in this business. And it happened to me too many times where I'm like, okay, why do people keep crying? I don't understand, right? Is my name Barbara Walters? What am I doing here? So just know that when you get better and better at being a consultant and asking great questions and challenging people to participate in the process by asking questions, has anyone ever experienced feeling kind of on the inside, but you're able to control your feelings until you're asked to speak? Right, the last time I had that happen, it was my grandfather's church service funeral after my grandfather died 2 years ago. And man, oh man, I had rehearsed that thing I was going to say. My family wanted me to say it on behalf of all the grandchildren. And so I had rehearsed it and I was like so cool as a cucumber. And I stood up and I was totally fine. And I went to say the first word and I couldn't speak. Because verbalizing, all of a sudden, all the emotion was like right there. I thought, I think I stood there silently for like 5 minutes. Everyone's like, okay, is he going to say anything here? Like, what is he waiting for? I couldn't speak. So recognize that having people participate in this process and verbalizing their stuff helps them move through it to a point where now the emotion isn't running the show. They've talked through it, the emotion's kind of out there, and now logic creeps back in and has them make better decisions, right? I don't know what question I was answering, or maybe I wasn't. What else? Anything else that you learned from this process? Or there any other comments you want to make before we move forward?
There was one thing that came up with our group, and that point was that sometimes, if you're kind of going back and forth and, you might, I guess sometimes, agents will just kind of maybe just settle and just so they get the listing. And then I guess, see how things pan out, like, afterwards.
So you need to take something a little higher than it should be.
Right.
Yeah. So my advice on that is have a standard in your business, right? For me, when the market was doing anything but, being deathly slow, I had a 10% standard in my business. And so I would look at things, and if in fact the seller and I could not come to agreement, and the seller was interested in a 10% or so higher list price than the market really said made sense, I wouldn't just say yes. We would have a full-blown conversation around why we are going to just have to agree to disagree on what the market is telling us, and come to a decision that, okay, so I am willing in partnership to put the house on the market for X because it is within my parameters. However, you need to be willing in 14 days to automatically make an adjustment based on the data. Again, we're separating the two things out. So what does the data tell you the right move is? And if you're unwilling to do what the data says, what is your want, desire, emotion, whatever? Where is that asking you to go? What's the difference? What's that delta? If it's within my range, I'll still say yes, with a frank discussion about the fact that this lives outside of what the data supports. And so therefore, we're going to set a time frame. We'll likely even sign a document that evening that adjusts the number down to the objective number based on the facts, so that we don't have to have this whole conversation all over again 13 days from now, right? Or maybe it's 7 days, or maybe it's, right? So I would say personally, it wouldn't be more than 14. It can always be less than 14.
So Rick, you're basically setting up the price reduction conversation at the listing.
Yeah, you're actually having it at the listing and signing a reduction document at the listing.
Right.
So it's already done. Goes on the market, does whatever. Right. And some of that objection handling, guys, has everything to do with the fact that, I understand your want for more. Would it surprise you to know that by placing it higher, you may ultimately be shooting yourself in the foot? May I explain? I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is Lisa Lee on like a bumper car or a Disney ride? I'm not sure what's going on in her home.
I'm moving around. I'm by the fire. I want to get my feet warm.
I see. Well, the rest of us don't have a fire to put our feet by. So la-di-da on you. That seems very unfair. Didn't your mother ever teach you that if you have something, if you don't have enough to share? Oh, that's pretty. Now we can all kind of do this.
We'll share. Come over. We'll share anytime.
There we go. All right. So I was saying something important. I got distracted. What was I saying? Anybody remember?
I think it was about pricing it high. You said that's
oh yes, right. And so it could come back to bite you in the foot, right? Because there's a strategy that differs between positioning for competition and positioning for negotiation. Are you aware that those are two different things? Would it surprise you to know that one of them is a benefit for your bottom line and the other less so? May I explain? I'm curious, the number you're choosing, do you think that might bring about negotiation or bring about competition for your home? Knowing full well that the buyers and the bank's appraisers are utilizing the data that we just went through to come to a decision about an offer to make on your property, or about the value they might see before they decide to even see the property, right? You can help them understand that listing it high, you may ask some questions. I'm curious, why that number? What's driving you to that number. Right? That's what a consultant asks. Instead of saying, oh, you don't want to go there, that's not going to work. Right? Because now you've made them wrong and you don't have the listing. Instead, continue to ask questions. What's driving you up there? Talk to me about how that coincides with the data that we just reviewed. What specific evidence can you find? None. I don't care about your evidence. Understood. Understood. I'm curious, however, do you think that the buyers who you're looking to attract might rely on this kind of evidence? Well, yes, but I don't care about them. Okay, understood. And do you think that the bank's appraiser, once, even if you were lucky enough to get a buyer who wasn't looking to utilize this data to make a decision about the value of your home, do you think the bank's appraiser who's about to lend them money and utilize the property as collateral to make sure they get paid back the money they're lending, do you think they might have a more objective look at the data and make decisions that way? Well, yeah, maybe. Me too. I couldn't agree more, right? See, and so I kind of worked that person around to something that I could agree with. Because I can agree with the fact that at somewhere along the line, someone's going to want to see a piece of paper that justifies this. So you can't escape it forever. Does this help?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much, very much.
So one of the things I want to make sure that you are hearing is that I'm not having a conversation about taking this listing. I'm having a conversation, I'm having a consultation around the seller making the best business decision possible. That might end up in me taking the listing. It might end up in me not taking the listing. It might end up in me taking the listing a little higher than I thought. However, we're going to have a real clear discussion around that. Because here's what I can tell you. If someone chooses a number that's outside of the range of what makes sense in order to get the home sold, and you don't tell them, you've now just lied to their face by executing that listing contract. And lying to their face is not part of your fiduciary responsibilities, right? So don't do that. Don't be the agent who just takes the listing to put the sign up. Be the agent who is brave enough to have a conversation that says, you and I may need to just choose to agree to disagree. And I like you a lot, and I love this house. Let's see if there's a way we can push forward in partnership. And if not, it has been lovely spending time with you. I wish you the absolute best. Remember, I told you packing up and leaving is sometimes one of the best assumptive closes you can make. And of course, if they're in the office, you can't pack up and leave because it's your office, right? But you can certainly start closing up your stuff. Anyway, questions, comments, concerns on pricing in the SPA? Okay, let's do this. I want to leapfrog over the actual document because I may choose to just do a forms class for you instead of working it into Ignite. So instead of going through the actual contract, I want to leap to the anatomy of a seller transaction. You received that on Friday, and then it was also sent out again today. The anatomy of a seller transaction. So what I'd like to do is spend our remaining time, our remaining 57 or so minutes, and run through what this looks like. And so this is a checklist for all intents and purposes that takes you from the moment you've received an offer as the listing agent to post-close and everything that happens in between. Would that be helpful to go through? Cool beans. All right, so grab that if you would. And I'm going to beg your forgiveness because I just have to push something to somebody. I apologize. I apologize for that, guys. Most things can wait until after we're done, and that one was like, nah, 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 nah. Okay, so the anatomy of a seller transaction is going to assume that you've taken the listing, you've marketed the property's been shown, and now there's at least an offer that's come in for you to process as the listing agent. Processing an offer on the list side is a little different than processing an offer on the buyer side, which is why we go through them separately. And you will get, by the way, an anatomy of the buyer transaction as well. So you'll have two checklists to work from. And so what I'd like to do is utilize this, this document as a means not just of helping you through the transaction, but also as an opportunity for you to ask additional questions about other things that maybe we haven't yet talked about, right? So let's dive into this. Number one, you're going to receive that offer from the buyer's agent. So the first thing you're going to do when you receive the offer from the buyer's agent is check to be certain that all the paperwork is included and makes sense, right? Is included and makes sense. I will tell you, I bought a house over the weekend, and one of the things I got back from the listing agent was the buyer didn't initial all the bottom pages of the property condition disclosure form. Of course, I was the buyer. I'm like, oh, oops. But I was thrilled to know that I had a listing agent on the other side that was paying attention, right? So here's what that looks like. You're going to receive an offer. The offer is going to be written on one of three different documents, pretty much depending on either where you're practicing or what you might be what you might be representing. And so what that means is the offer to purchase for those of you in and around Greater Danbury, even into Ridgefield and Wilton, right? In that mid to northern Fairfield County. For the most part, you're writing things up on offers to purchase, excuse me. So as a listing agent, you may well receive, if your listings are in that area, you may receive something on an offer to purchase, which is kind of a non-binding binder, right? It says right on there, this is not a contract. And then we move from there to more of a contract that the attorneys write. For those of you who practice more along the coast, you're typically working with purchase agreements, right? That's a 2-page kind of outline that has a little more teeth in it. It does say on page 2 that it is a contract. Once everybody signs it, and that generally speaking, that you're going to use that to bind the parties together until or unless it's replaced by another contract that the attorneys write. And then in the entire rest of the state, right, because we like to do things different here in Fairfield County, in the entire rest of the state and along the eastern edge of Fairfield County, people typically use the fill-in-the-blank 4-page contract that comes out of the MLS. You also may be asked to utilize that 4-page contract if you're working a short sale or an REO property, right, a bank-owned property. Oftentimes, a third party, like a lender, is going to ask for something more concrete like that contract. So when you're receiving offers, know that they can come in on a bunch of different forms. Any form most forms are valid. You just need to check through and make sure that the offer itself makes sense. You're going to see a copy of some kind of earnest money. Generally speaking, that's some percentage that people put down right up front. make sure that they have a letter from a lender qualifying them for the loan, and or proof of funds if they're paying cash. And then, of course, all the disclosures that exist. A property condition disclosure form, a lead disclosure if that's applicable. If it's inside of the office, you may have a dual or designated agency consent form. If it's a short sale disclosure. So anything that's relevant to that property in terms of the disclosures. Any questions on how you're going to review the offer based on what you receive? Yes, sir, Christian.
So recently, again, when I had a listing that just closed successfully, I received an offer and they did not put down a 1% binder check. So the agent on the other side, I believe they're from New Haven County. So is my understanding that some counties do not have to put a 1% binder check down, because I know in Fairfield County, that's usually what we do here, you know, a typical protocol. But I was just surprised to know that some agents or some different counties don't do that.
Yeah, so there it is a reality that that earnest money, that money that people write with the offer, there is no state law that says that money has to be written, right? In Fairfield County, generally speaking, buyers are writing 1% earnest money checks. 1% of the offer is the check that they write just to kind of show good faith.
Right.
They don't have to do that. They can put down zero. They can put down $100. I one time worked with folks who had purchased a couple of times in California before coming out here. And they were buying like a $700,000 house. And I said, well, you know, we'll need 1% to start the whole thing off. And they looked at me like, 1%, that's $7,000. And I said, uh-huh. Like in California, they put down $100 just to kind of hold the contract. And I'm like, okay, well, so just know that there is no law that says that has to work that way. However, basically, you want to follow reasonable and customary. Right? Because if the buyers are not following reasonable and customary, it can make the listing agent and the seller look at the offer a little bit differently. And to Christian's point, in other counties, sometimes the rules are a little bit different than here, right? But generally speaking, you're going to look for some money down up front. What I started doing, because the landscape is so competitive out there, when I make offers on investment properties now, I just write them a check for 10%. I want them to, I don't screw around with 1% or $100. I want them to see that I have money and I'm willing to spend it on their property. So I just push them a full 10% right up front to make a point. So you can utilize that good faith estimate, earnest money, that good faith down payment in a number of different ways. All right, number 2, please note a verbal phone call stating that someone is bringing you an offer is not actually an offer. Just because someone promises you something doesn't mean a darn thing. And I've watched listing agents get themselves in trouble there because they get a phone call, right? So Maria from Coldwell Banker calls me and says, oh, I just showed that property and they love it. I'm going to be writing up an offer. You know, where can I get you later on? And I tell Maria exactly how to grab me and get that offer to me. And then I make the mistake of picking up the phone and calling my seller and saying, guess what? Great news. Maria from Coldwell Banker just said that her and her clients are writing up an offer. I'll call you as soon as I have it. And an hour goes by, 2 hours go by, 3 hours go by. And now I'm staring at the phone, wondering where Maria is. Now I'm eating dinner. Still no Maria. I call Maria after dinner. It goes to voicemail. I text her. She doesn't answer. What's happened to those sellers now?
They're going to be pissed because they're going to be waiting for that offer.
Right? You've set up an expectation that you have no control over. So do me a favor. You don't have an offer until you're holding the offer in your hand or you can see it on your computer or on your phone. Right? Because someone actually has sent you physically an offer. Once you have it, then you can move forward. Of course, if dual agency exists, which ultimately means that the buyer will be being brought by somebody in the same office, you do have to push through and work the dual designated agency consent form before negotiation on the offer, which is just getting consent from the buyer and then the seller and then me before you move forward with the offer. And that's only for a dual scenario where either you're on both sides, right? It's your buyer and it's your listing, or it's your listing and somebody else is bringing that offer from inside of the office. Number 4, once you've verified that all the paperwork has been received, then call the seller and inform them the receipt of the offer. If possible, arrange a time to meet with them to present the offer in person. If you can't do that in person, or if a current health scenario prevents that, or you and the seller choose not to have that be the case, then make sure all decision makers are able to be on the phone or via Zoom, right? Today, I would say I would prefer via Zoom because that way you get to actually see one another at the same time. You do want them to have their own copy of the offer. However, if you receive the offer at 3 o'clock and somebody doesn't get home from the office until 7 o'clock, you don't want to set up a time for 7:30 for everybody to be on Zoom together and at 1:30 shoot them over the offer so they have 5 or 6 hours to stare at this offer without you being there to help translate it. Right? You see how that could not work out so well for everybody? They're looking at the numbers. They always hyper-focus. Let me restate that. They oftentimes hyper-focus on one number, and it's not always the price, right? Sometimes the number that they look at is the closing date or the price or how much they're financing, right? But they will typically hyper-focus on one portion of the offer without taking into consideration the entire offer, and without you there to walk them through it. It could create angst, right? So what you want to do is, if you're having a meeting at 7:30, shoot it over at 7:15, so they have it and can if they want to print it out and kind of take a look at it. But then within 10 minutes or so, you're there on the phone with them to help walk them through it. You're then going to review the offer with the seller. This may sound silly, but I want you to highlight this. Do this in an upbeat and encouraging manner, no matter what the price and terms of the offer are. Remember, someone liked their home enough to want to buy it, and the seller is not required to accept any offer that is not acceptable to them. Now, I know to many of you that sounds like a duh thing to say. Here's why it's there. Because I have listened to far too many listing agents get on the phone with a seller and say something to this effect. Hey, Chelsea, it's Rick. Well, here we are. You know, I look, whatever happens from here on out, please don't shoot the messenger. I didn't write the offer. I wasn't responsible for having a conversation with them before they wrote it. You know, but let's just get through it, and you know, we'll see what we can do to make this work. I had far better expectations.
Awful way to present it.
Are you kidding?
Awful.
Is there any wonder why the seller of that particular property looks at the offer and says, this is terrible. Why on earth would I want to have a conversation with this buyer? How dare they? You might as well have written those words down and said, you know what, here, you just feel this way and read that. Mm-hmm. Right? If you don't set the mood, if you don't create the expectation that every offer is an awesome offer, well, they don't know how to behave and how to react. So they take their cue from you. And if you're like Eeyore giving them the information, well, then that's how they're going to hear it. So raise your right hand and say, I promise not to be an Eeyore, right? And so the idea is always upbeat and excited, even if it sucks. I shouldn't say sucks, right? Especially since we're recording. Even if it's not the best offer on the planet. Because it's better than the offer they had yesterday. And it gets us one step closer to having the conversation that gets them to a closing. Right? So be careful.
Oh, I was gonna add to that.
Yeah, just give me half a second. So be careful that you're not bringing judgment to this experience. Again, this is where objectivity, the more objective you can be, the better you will be at your job. Because the second subjectivity creeps in and you start giving opinion and making like that crunchy, I smell garbage face because you really don't like the offer, or you think it should have been better. Maybe you're thinking that, you know, a better offer, you'd make more money. I don't know what you're thinking. It all has to just be objective. This is what it is. Here are your options. What should we do? And I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like shortly. Go ahead, Christian.
No, I was going to piggyback off of what you just said, because I had a situation where I had 3 offers on a home. Make a long story short, some of the buyers got cold feet, some got scared, some couldn't agree. Got a 4th offer. It was below asking. Again, I was very positive and said, we have another offer. We have something at the table. Make a long story short, we countered offered them, and they came up. So even if the offer is low, it's not the end of the world. You know, it's still worth it to ask questions, and it's still worth it to counter, because you never know, these people will come up.
Yeah, my script for that used to be, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would you agree with the statement, it's not about where they start, it's about where they end up? Does that make sense? Right? Because that's true. Who cares where they start? Who cares? It's all about where you end up. Number 6, the review of the offer should be done comprehensively. I'm going to read for you, if you'll allow me to, an example of how I think this offer should sound when you're working this through with them. I want you to listen. I want you to underline or highlight things that you liked, or ahas that you get as we go through this, and we'll talk about it afterwards. All righty, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. So the offer is from Tom and Sally Smith from Pennsylvania. They have 2 kids and another one on the way. They will both be working down in White Plains once they make their move to Connecticut. They are opening negotiations on your home with an offer of $550,000, and they will look to finance 80% of that with a mortgage. We do have a letter of pre-qualification from Westport Mortgage for that amount. Their ability to obtain this mortgage will be a contingency in the contract. The other 20% will be brought in cash, 10% total at contract signing, and the other 10% brought to the closing table. They have asked for the following extra items to be included in the sale: pool equipment, the lower level freezer, and the play set in the backyard. Their contract will be contingent upon satisfactory inspections of both the house and septic systems, which will also include testing the well water and testing for radon in both the air and the water. They're asking for 7 days to get those inspections completed. They would like to have contracts signed and back to you within 14 days. And they've requested a June 30th closing date. So let's discuss. What are your thoughts? Do you have any questions? Right, so there's an outline of how I think an offer should sound when you're reading through this outline. What did you hear?
I can go. The one thing that I liked was the way you relayed the money component of how it was opening the negotiations at that price. Because I mean, maybe it's not exactly true for these times, these COVID times, but in normal negotiations, no one opens with their final number. I mean, maybe now you do, but to say this is where they're opening makes the seller hopeful that there'll be room for more.
Yeah, agreed. And what Effie points out is exactly why it's written that way, right? Because even in today's times where people are throwing big numbers around, I would still put that out there. So they're opening negotiations this way, right? To keep the seller pointed positively. If that's at asking, okay. I've had a number of scenarios. I think I told you last week, a number of scenarios with many of your colleagues who opened negotiations at full price and were countered with over asking price with no other offer on the table. The seller was just looking to take advantage of what was going on. I was a little bit nervous they were going to do that to me this weekend. because I opened with full price because it was brand new to the market. They didn't. They accepted the offer. Mostly because I said that I would take it off the table. I made the offer at 7:30 on Saturday night, and they had until noon on Sunday to say yes, or it was coming off the table. Because what they wanted to do was wait around for additional offers to populate the the table, and I wasn't interested in that. So you can take me at full price right now, or you can wait around and hope you get something better. They took me. What else? Thank you, Effie. What else?
I like that you gave a bit of background on the buyers.
Yeah. Yeah. Humanizing buyers is really important for sellers, right? For many sellers, it's a must, right? For all sellers, it will at least help give them a picture of what this transaction looks like and who the people are involved. Some people may not make decisions based on background, others may, right? But it's a really good idea to get as much data as you can about the buyers and present that to the sellers so that they have a full picture. What else?
Rick, isn't that kind of like the letter that actually one of the first calls that I was on when I became an agent with you guys was bringing up that the buyers, when you submit their offer, whether they can or cannot have the letter.
Mm-hmm.
That's that kind of, this is like that example, right?
Yeah, so the buyer's agent and the buyers could have written a cover letter,
right?
Which includes some personal information. I think, Chelsea, what you're speaking of is I was railing against the MLS that morning because in their infinite, hold on a second.
Yeah, no.
Exactly right. Right. It always fascinates me that those same people choose to get in a car and drive from their house to their office or to the grocery store every single day, and yet they don't view the dangers of getting in a car and putting themselves at risk, but they over assert on top of us activities that are normal real estate activities. They overthink them and push all that kind of crap onto us. So yes, you're right. It's a version of that. Alrighty, let's keep going. Anything else with that example?
So there is one thing that I love about the way you presented it is
yes,
you present the entire thing, soup to nuts, before you say, do you have any questions? You don't stop at the number, then stop at the closing date. Just get the whole thing out there and then talk.
Yeah, that's so well said, Donna, because the reality is the offer is not about one number, right? It's about the entire package. Some sellers are willing to accept less money because somebody will close quickly, right? One of the things that I did this weekend is I made sure that the owner lives on the first floor of this property, and so he'll be moving out, and so he was there to show the other units as well as his property. So take full advantage of that. I asked about 1,000 questions, and he just kept answering them. You know, oh my goodness, is that your RV back there? Yes, it is my RV. I'm curious, where are you headed? Where we're going to Florida. Oh wow, are you taking the RV to Florida, or are you purchasing something in Florida? Well, we're gonna live in the RV for a while until we figure out where in Florida we want to move. Oh wow, that's awesome. What's bringing you to Florida? Oh, we just can't stand the weather here. Wow, interesting. And so here it is, the first 30-degree day, right on, because it wasn't all that warm on whatever day I saw it. I'm curious, when do you want to be down in Florida? Well, you know, we'd like to get there as quickly as possible. Got it. Nothing else kind of pulling you down there. You just don't really want the winters. Nope. So I'm curious, if we were to make an offer on the property, is there a closing date that makes better sense for you versus any other? And he said, well, you know, we'd like to have this done as quickly as possible. Okay, great. That sounds awesome. Right. So in my offer, I got to write closing date at seller's discretion. I don't care when we close. And so I specifically went back to the listing agent and said, hey, you know, I know the seller is anxious to get to Florida. We can close quickly if he desires. And if he needs a little more time to finish packing, I know his wife just had a little surgery, and so maybe she needs a couple of weeks to recover. we're happy to kind of hold off until December if they have kids around, maybe spend one last Christmas here. We can close right after that. Whatever works for them. I knew more about what was going on with the seller, I think, than the listing agent did, because I stood there and asked him a ton of questions so that I could craft my offer. So again, they didn't come back to me and overbid. They didn't push and wait for other offers. They just accepted my offer. Is it because I offered them full price and set a stage that said, I'll close whenever you want? That flexibility may well have been worth something to him, instead of waiting around for someone to pay him an extra 10 grand or something. See how that works? And when you outline the whole thing and have people listen to the whole thing, then they get to respond to the whole thing instead of, so it's, 550 with a June 30th closing date. Oh, and they're financing, they're getting a mortgage. That's a very different way to describe an offer than what I gave you as an example, right? Okay, number 7, be certain that you examine every line of the offer, right? You want to be able to catch any kind of language that might obligate the seller for something more than they think, if in fact they sign it. For example, language that binds the sellers to the buyers, more like contract language, right? Before they sign that, you want to be certain to point it out and explain it to them, and maybe encourage them to get some guidance from their attorney before they sign, if in fact they have additional questions or concerns about it. Your job, though, is to point it out and make sure that you've been through the offer and they're aware of all the things that may pull them in one direction or another. Number 8, work with the seller such that they fully understand the offer that's being presented. Answer any questions, counsel them on next steps. If the offer is acceptable, they may accept. And I want you to really listen to that sentence. If the offer is acceptable, they may accept it. I think we are sometimes pre-programmed, and we take our pre-programming and we push it on our sellers. I think we're pre-programmed to think that negotiation is a must, right? There needs to be some back and forth, or somehow we haven't won the day. Guys, sometimes offers are made and they're just fine, and the seller gets to say yes. Make sure you set that expectation with them. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, sometimes we have offers where there'll be negotiation, and sometimes we have offers where negotiation may not need to be necessary. I'm curious, if you get an offer that meets your expectations, are you willing to accept it? It's not a bad question to ask your seller as you're going on the market, right? It's just like on the buy side, when you set expectations. I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if we head out today and you see a property that interests you in the first 3 or 4 that I show you, are you willing to make an offer on that today? Or are we setting expectations with people that it takes longer? You see my point? So if the offer is not acceptable, you're now going to counsel them on some kind of response. Now, in my opinion, that response is not we don't want to counter. My sellers weren't allowed to do that. Right? Somebody makes an offer, you offer something back. Right? Or else it's like going to the park with a baseball and 2 mitts, and you throw the ball to your friend and your friend catches the ball and goes home. Well, now we're not having a catch anymore, are we? Right? So always encourage a counter if the offer is not acceptable to them. Nicole, let me just read that question. Why would the seller not counter an offer over asking?
Jen coached me through this when it was happening on Saturday and Sunday. And when I had got to the house, it had been on the market for 2 days. When I got to the house, I met the listing agent's assistant, and he said, we've already gotten a few offers on this house, but they were under asking. If your buyer wants this house, I would suggest asking or above. And So Jen said, go in $1,000 above. It'll show that you're serious, and, you know, there'll be room to go back and forth. And then this morning at 8 o'clock, you know, he just said, his exact words were, the buyer picked somebody with better terms. But we didn't ask for anything at all. It was, you know, weird. So I don't know. So of course she's upset, but she said, can you go back? Can you find out? I said, I can't find anything out. I mean, I don't know if it's a cash offer. I can't ask those questions.
Well, you can ask those questions. They don't have to answer your questions,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you certainly can ask the questions. And so the idea of sellers make decisions based on a long laundry list of things that make sense to them, right? As a listing agent for most of my career, I will tell you that lots of times I thought the listing agents were making really smart, interesting decisions and decisions that I supported and thought were the right decisions. And a whole lot of times sellers made decisions that I thought, why on earth are you making that decision? Right? I've had sellers make decisions where it cost them $10,000 because they liked they met that one couple because they happened to be home for that showing and they liked them. Right? Okay, well, maybe these folks are awesome too. Right? Why don't we pull them in and see if you like them as well? Nope. I've had sellers make decisions based on who the first person to the table was. Right? So you could have experienced somebody, and don't forget, the listing agent's job is to accept all the offers and work with the sellers to make a decision about, you know, how to go back. And so you may have thrown an offer in over asking, and the listing agent went back to the other 3 offers that they had or had received that didn't go anywhere to say, look, now we have interest that's at or over asking. Do you want to adjust anything on your offer? We'll consider you because you were the first one.
Oh.
Sometimes it's closing, sometimes it's cash, right? Terms can be cash versus a mortgage, all those kinds of things. So sellers get to make kind of crazy decisions. And before we finish together, I'll give you some additional scripts about the way I like to address multiple offers. I like to do it in such a way where the buyer themselves makes a decision about how much over asking price they're going to go. You may notice a trend with me in the next 2 weeks in that, or the next however time we're together, that I don't make decisions on behalf of my clients, and I don't give them a whole lot of advice because I feel like advice is oftentimes based in opinion. So for me, it maybe wouldn't have been go $1,000 over. It would have been a conversation that says the asking price is the foundational basic requirement that the seller, it's what the seller expects, right? So going in at full price is kind of like no big whoop, especially in this scenario.
Mhm.
I like to look at the anything over asking as insurance. So then you ask the question. So, you know, again, that asking price is the basic requirement for entry into this property. How much insurance do you want to buy on top of that to make sure that you come out on top? Maybe the buyer would have said $1,000. Maybe the buyer would have said $5,000. Maybe the buyer would have said, you know what, for me to be in that house, I'm willing to pay $10,000 over the asking price. So let's do, if that's going to win me the day and that's the insurance I need, let's do that. But then they're making the decision, not you, because when you make the decision, too many times it cycles back to you to say, well, you know, you told me to do $1,000 and it wasn't good enough. And so then there's blame that gets to go on. So I like to take that off the table, and I like to encourage people to make their own decisions based on based on looking at the market and their own desires to live there, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Sure. So number 9, you may want to call the name on the mortgage company, right? So you get a mortgage pre-qual letter, right? If you don't know that person, I would encourage you, let the buyer's agent know that you're going to make a phone call, and then just call and ask some questions, because you want to make sure that mortgage person is actually real. right? I've had things written by somebody's aunt. Now, the aunt happened to be a mortgage person in a different state who never reviewed the nephew's finances. She just wrote him a letter, right? How did I know? Because I picked up the phone and I called. Oh, that's my nephew. Oh, that's awesome. First quick question. I noticed I dialed down to Florida. Are you licensed in the state of Connecticut as a mortgage licensee? Oh, no. Oh, okay. So I'm curious, will little Tommy be using someone else? Or how do you expect to be able to process the loan if you're not licensed in the state? Well, he just asked me for a qualification letter. Got it. Thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon. Hi, buyer's agent. No. Here's some suggestions. You need to go to somebody local, right? It happens. It happens a lot. So you may just want to make that phone call. Can you call somebody else's client's mortgage loan officer and ask questions? Yeah, of course you can. That's why they gave you the letter, right? While you have them on the phone, you might as well ask a bunch more questions. I'm curious, is there any concerns that you have about these folks being able to obtain this loan? I'm curious, do you see any delays based on the program that they're pushing into? I'm curious, in your conversations with the buyers, is there anything that the seller should know about their ability to move forward and purchase this property? Anything that's come up that might be of interest? Now, you may be sitting there thinking, some of those questions sound like maybe they shouldn't be answering them. Yeah, like most of the questions I just put on the table, they likely shouldn't be answering. Doesn't mean you can't ask them. Because sometimes you ask questions and people just answer the questions. And now you have more data, more information that you can move back to your seller with to help them make a great decision. Number 10, once the offer is negotiated and acceptable to both parties, ask the agent for the buyer to rewrite the offer, right? You're going to have a new clean offer because if anything's been changed, and you're going to get everybody to sign it. That should happen within about 24 hours, that goes back to the agent for the buyers. Frankly, with the way things are moving so quickly today and with electronic signing, 24 hours is way too long, right? Way too long. Unless there are extenuating circumstances like, they're camping in Botswana and don't have their cell phones with them. There's no reason that you can't get signatures from everybody pretty quickly nowadays, right? Number 11, ask the agent for the buyer who the buyers will be using as their attorney, who the buyers will be using as their home inspector, who the buyers will be using as their septic inspector, and when those inspections are set for, right? You enter this phase now as listing agent where your job is to keep everything moving swiftly and smoothly. Swiftly and smoothly. Sometimes buyers agents don't know the answer to those questions. It's your job then to set out a plan that says, okay, great. So if you could do me a favor and connect with your buyers and get the answers to those 3 questions, it's 6:43. Could we have those questions answered maybe by 8 tonight? Or do you need until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning? Right? Set some parameters so that everyone's working within a time frame. What I find, one of the differences between a weak listing agent and a strong listing agent is that the strong listing agent does not assume that they have strength on the other side or even skill, like an iota of skill. That doesn't mean you don't have someone who is strong or don't have someone skilled. I just am not going to make that assumption. And so I'm going to set the timeline very, very specifically and then rather rigidly hold everyone to those time periods. That doesn't mean rudely or annoyingly. However, it does mean rigidly because especially in today's market where we need to know relatively quickly whether or not these buyers are going to perform because we had other offers that we said no to, or we have other interests out there, or we have other buyers that need a property that we could be losing by sticking with somebody who ultimately is going to fall apart with, right? So recognize that your job to hold everybody accountable to the time frame that's set is an important one. 11D says, ask the buyer if buyer's agent if the buyer plans on making application with the lender or the broker whose letter was included with the offer. I just offer that to you because we had a surprise one time, and it really caused my sellers a big problem, which means then it cost me a big problem. I assumed that since we got a letter from whomever, Wells Fargo, that's who they were proceeding with. And what they were doing was they were actually proceeding with some online, like, Rocket Mortgage or Lending Tree, one of those online things. I'm going to tell you, even today, I would encourage my sellers to say thanks, but no thanks. We love your offer. However, you're going to have to proceed with a different lender, minimally, to get qualified or approved through someone local as a backup to your online fancy pants whatever thing, right? Because what happens with online lenders far too many times? Dry closings. You get all the way to the closing, and guess what? The money doesn't arrive because it's stuck, or because someone didn't sign something, on their end, and there's no one to talk to. There's no one to hold accountable when those things happen, right? So I would encourage sellers to say yes, as long as, right? And all that has to do with this conversation around parsing through all the data that's being presented and having sellers make really good decisions. Okay, number 13, give a copy of all the paperwork, including the contract information sheet that is mentioned in number 12, which is just an outline. It's in .loop sorry, not .loop, it's in DocuSign as well as on the MLS if you're looking for that form. It's just a one-pager that lists all the information for both sides of the transaction, and then just get that to everybody, right? You want all that paperwork, including that information sheet, both to your client's attorney and to the MCA in your market center within 3 days. Within 3 days. I would encourage you to make it within 24 hours, but certainly within 3 days. You upload that information through command on the inside. Number 14, once the inspection dates are set, be certain to inform the seller. Yeah, that's there because I one time got a phone call at 8:30 in the morning. Hi, Rick, it's Janet. Hi, Janet, how are you? She's like, well, I'm okay. I'm here in my nightgown in my kitchen, feeding my 3 small children breakfast. So they're like the kitchen is a disaster. And someone just rang the doorbell saying that they're the inspector with this entire posse of people looking to get in the house. Oops, I forgot to tell her. Guys, that's why I give you this checklist, because I don't want you to make the mistakes that I had to learn hard lessons from, right? Because as you scale and your business gets bigger, it's really easy when you have one listing to remember when the inspection is and to tell the seller. When you have 20 or 30 listings and 10 of them or 12 of them or 18 of them have offers going, and you have different inspections going on 3 different times during the same day, it's really, really easy to start having things get missed, which is, again, why I want you to have some kind of a checklist. So make sure that you call. The good news is I rescued the relationship. I immediately said, you know what, let me call, see if they can reschedule. She said, no. If you can buy me about 30 or 40 minutes, I will be out of their hair, but I need you to buy me 30 or 40 minutes. So I called the other side and said, here's the deal. I screwed up. She's not expecting you. She needs about 45 minutes to get out of the house. So start outside. Do everything you can do outside. Do as thorough a job outside as you possibly can for the next 45 minutes, and the house is yours, right? So make sure that you communicate that. Number 15, report the property as under agreement, which today would be show, right, in the MLS within 48 hours of a fully executed offer document. Remember, that's the MLS's rules. Those aren't my rules. What happens if you have a seller who says, yeah, I don't want you to report that as under agreement until after the inspections happen, because I don't want that stigma if they decide not to buy the house of, being back on the market. Can you do that?
I think you can, but you're breaking the rules, so right?
Well, so yeah, so yeah, well said. So you can do it. You just really shouldn't be doing it, because now you're breaking the rules, and nobody likes when it's done to them, right? The rules are there for everybody to know what's available and what's not available. So if a seller pushes back on that, you get to say, thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I understand the reasoning behind that request. Unfortunately, I'm unable to comply with that request because the rules of our local MLS say within 48 hours. I'm happy to do it at 47 hours and 59 and a half minutes. I'll keep it open for that long, but at 48 hours, I have to report that as under agreement. Number 16, stop by the inspection to check in and see if there's any information that you can provide. Best not to hang around, right? The inspection is not for you to be there. As listing agent, you're not there for the whole inspection. The buyer's agent is there with the buyers and their professionals to assess the house. You can stop by, or you can just call. After a while, I stopped stopping by and I just would call the buyer's agent, right? Hey, how are things going? Anything I can help with? Any questions you have? No? Great. Let me know how things go. Right? So you're just touching base and checking in. Number 17, it's at this point that you'll need to keep all parties in action. So set a schedule for yourself to be in constant contact with the sellers, who are your clients, the buyer's agent, the seller's attorney, and anyone else who might be important in your particular transaction. And what I mean by that is you get to be in charge of everybody as the listing agent. I know it oftentimes seems like, well, I have to be responsible for everybody, but for myself and everybody else. And my answer is, well, you don't have to be. And yet what I've learned is that you should be if closings are important to you. If you want things to go smoothly, again, don't make assumptions that everyone else is doing the things that need to be done. Instead, make assumptions that you need to be in contact. And it's not to be annoying, right? If Donna's on the other side of the transaction, every couple of days, I'm just going to call her and say, hey, Donna, it's Rick Scott, just checking in on your buyers at 123 Main Street. Anything I can do to help? Any hiccups you see? Anything you need from me? Okay, great. Well, you know where I am if you need me. And I'm going to make that phone call every couple of days. I'm going to check in with the sellers every couple of days with that same conversation. I'm going to check in with their attorney, right? I want to make sure that the buyer's agent is plugged into the buyer's mortgage. You seeing how all this works? So once the inspections are done, you can expect to hear from the buyer's agent within 48 hours or so regarding any items that might need to be addressed. Set expectations with the buyer's agent about when you'll hear from them. Again, this is all part of that timeline, right? So if Chelsea's on the other side of this transaction, I'm going to set an expectation. Chelsea, I'm curious, when everything is finished today, when can I expect to hear from you with any issues that might pop up, if any? Right, and so Chelsea's going to give me an answer. She's either going to say, you know what, I think we'll have all the reports back in 48 hours, and then I'm going to meet with the buyers. If there's anything to talk about, we'll have that back to you by, it's Monday night. We'll have that back to you by Wednesday night or by Thursday morning. Right, great. And so now we have clarity around what my expectation is and what her expectation is. And then by Wednesday night, if I haven't heard, now I get to make another phone call. Hey, it's Pesty Rick calling just to check in. Do we have that data back, or is there anything that we need to address? And Chelsea says, you know what, we're almost there. I need to get one more report. We should have that later tonight. So if you can give me till 10 o'clock tomorrow, I'll have everything we need. Again, communication, 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 communication. Yeah, 418 says don't make, as the listing agent, don't make the mistake of assuming that there's nothing coming back to you from the inspections just because you haven't heard from the buyer's agent. I've seen that mistake happen way too many times. Right, well, it's been 3 days, no one's called, I guess we're fine. Yeah, don't make that assumption. Call and ask, are we fine? Right? And if I call and ask Chelsea, are we fine? And she says yes, I'm gonna say, great, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear it. Do me a favor, just shoot me a quick email that says upon receipt of all the inspection reports, the buyers are good with their inspections. Just give that to me. Give me that information so that I have it and it's in writing someplace, so that later on, no one has the opportunity to get what I call selective amnesia, right? And forget exactly what was said or what was not said. So let's just get that so we have it. Is there a question there, Chelsea?
Yeah, actually, at this point is if people are communicating things like that or through text message versus email, does that, if you ever ended up in, not you, if one of us, if somebody ever ended up in, kind of a predicament, or if it ended up in a legal issue or something, does a text message hold up at this point? Is it recognized by the courts? Do you know?
Yeah, I believe the answer to that is yes. Effie, can you give us some background on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a writing. It shows the meeting of the minds. And I would just recommend doing a screenshot and email it to yourself and then just file it electronically somewhere.
Okay.
Love it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I wondered that. Thank you.
19 keeps tabs on the mortgage, right? Again, has the client made application? We one time had a buyer for one of our listings who, like 3 or 4 weeks later, when I pushed the seller said, we haven't seen an appraiser. And I thought, yeah, you know what, that's kind of true that we haven't seen an appraiser. What's the deal there? I went back to the buyer's agent and said, what's the deal with the appraiser? And so the buyer's agent called the buyers and said, hey, could you ask your loan officer what the deal was with the appraiser? Because we haven't seen an appraisal request come through. And the buyers said, well, when does that happen? And the buyer's agent said, well, it should be happening now. Oh, okay, well, because we haven't actually made application yet. So should we have done that already? Like, you haven't made application, it's been a month, right? And so again, it's so easy to look across the table and say, well, why didn't that buyer's agent do their job? Why didn't the buyers know? Why didn't this happen? I will tell you that I looked at myself in the mirror and said, you know what, shame on me, I got to add that to my list. Now I have to ask right away, hey, I'm just curious, making sure the buyers actually made application for their mortgage. Because you can't change everybody else, right? You can change your system and make sure that you're dotting all I's and crossing all T's to make sure everyone else is doing the things they have to do. Number 20, inform the sellers when the appraisal is going to take place. 21, check in with the seller's attorney to ensure that you know that the contracts are completed and have been sent to the buyer's attorney for signature. You're going to negotiate any inspection items through to the satisfaction of both parties. We're going to talk about negotiation of inspection items when we work through our buyer side. So any questions you have on the seller side, hold them, and we're going to talk about them on the buyer transaction piece altogether. Number 25. This is a really important one when you're the listing agent, and we'll end on this note tonight. Number 25, encourage the sellers to begin packing. Trust me when I tell you, it takes almost all sellers way longer to pack the stuff they have in their house than they think it's going to. So this way early, you should be, I mean, frankly, I used to encourage sellers to start packing as the house was going on the market, right? Take all the crap in all these closets. Don't say crap though. Take all of your brilliant, beautiful possessions in all of these closets, pack them up, and let's get them into the basement or in the garage, because we want to make sure the closets look expansive to all the buyers. Here's the secret. Yes, it makes the closets look bigger, and they've already started packing, right? encourage them to just keep packing, find boxes, encourage them to go and where are you going to find boxes? Where, if they need movers, give them the information they need about the movers if they're not doing it themselves, right? You want to just stay on top of that. I've been to too many walkthroughs for closings on either side of the transaction where the sellers are panicked because half their stuff is still in the house and it's, you know, an hour and a half to closing. So it's just encourage that to happen. Remind them that they have an attic. I find that oftentimes people forget about, oh yeah, we're totally ready. Okay, well, what about the attic that you've been shoving stuff into for the last 32 years? Oh, not even sure what's up there. Yeah, I can tell you. Like 4 dumpsters worth of stuff that you have to now find time and effort and energy to get out of the attic and into the dumpster, right? So again, make sure that early on in the process, you're encouraging them to pack, because that's the piece that sometimes they let get away from them and it causes them angst later on. So draw a line under number 25. We're going to shoot through 26 through 41, which is quick, on Wednesday. I'm going to answer any other questions that you might have around sellers, and we are going to dive into the pre-listing package, because I told you that we would put that towards the end, even though it was out of order. We're going to work through the pre-listing package for about 20 minutes so you see what that looks like and give you some opportunities to go online and get some foundational materials so you can start building your own. And then we're going to move into our buyer unit. So we'll talk a little bit about pre-qualification for buyers. And then I'll send you on Wednesday the buyer scripts for the buyer consultation, which we will run through like we did the buyer side. And then we, that'll probably take Wednesday and Friday to get through. And then Monday we will work through the anatomy of a buyer transaction. Questions, comments, concerns, queries?
Hey, Rick.
Yes, sir.
I have a quick question. So based on your whole about getting out of the house and so on and so forth, we were working with one of our buyers and we were negotiating with the seller, and it came down to, we got to the agreed upon price, but they wanted a closing date of March 31st of 2021. How would you handle getting that? We came to an impasse because it was almost 6 months away.
Sure. So as were you the listing agent?
Buyer.
Yeah. So the buyer, so the sellers wanted a delayed closing?
Correct.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. So you know, really something that far out should have been written on the MLS so that everybody didn't waste their time. I think I would address it a couple of different ways. If I represented the buyer, the first thing I would do is go back to the listing agent to say, okay, so talk to me about this March 31st. What's driving that decision, right? Is it finances? Is it keeping somebody in a school for a certain period of time, right? So once we understand what the story is, we can start figuring out if there's a solution to it, because sometimes people just need to hang on to their house for a certain period of time. So maybe you do like a rent back where the sellers could move out and the buyers could move in, rent the house for 4 or 5 months, and then have a closing. You know, with their attorneys involved to make sure that all of the details of all of that would make sense. Sometimes I've worked out deals where if people are looking to have a delayed closing like that, well then the other party gets the benefit. And what I mean by that is, if the buyers want a delayed closing, well, sometimes you have to pay for that, right? If you're willing to pay more for the house, I may be willing to wait for your closing. If it's the other way around, like in your scenario where the sellers are asking for a delayed closing, you know, in this kind of a market, it's kind of tough to say, hey, you know what, that's great, but it's going to cost you 20 grand. So we'll wait, but that's going to cost us this much money to stay in our housing or whatever. And so we're going to look to take that off the price. With this kind of a market, the seller is likely to find someone who will wait. So there, you may have less power in that scenario.
Yeah, that's what we ran into. We ran into the fact that, you know, it's a time money situation. And our buyer clients are renting month to month. So obviously every month that they stay in a rental, it's costing them more. So they want to pay less for the house. But yet the buyers are saying, well, we're selling a house less than asking, but so we want the time. So we're really in a stalemate right now.
Yeah. So maybe what I just said also makes could come back to the buyers as well. Right? The buyers could simply decide. The sellers could come back and say, look, if you want the house earlier, then pay us for it, right? Or maybe the buyers could go back and say, okay, we will pay you your asking price, but we want to close by January 15th. So,
Right.
so having them buy the closing date may be a way to work that out.
Okay.
Or they find a house that is more within the realm of reasonable in terms of closing date.
Right. But you think that typically a closing date that far out is untypical?
If it was October when you started the conversation about the offer, October to March is a little long, right? It's a little long. It's like 60 days longer than what I would say is more typical, right? We usually only see that in the spring, right? Sometimes people put their houses on the market in late February or early March, and they want to have their kids stay in school. So they ask for closing dates that are the first week of July. That's the typical time of year that we see that pop up.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys, have an awesome evening.
Thanks, Rick.
Happy Monday night. See you soon.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow, 9 a.m.